Hello. In this video, I want to talk about some of the key learnings that I got in the last few years as I've been working on my own condition. And these learnings, I believe they transfer to anybody working on a difficult problem or is in a difficult situation where the solution is unclear. So in my case, if you see my backstory, I got hit by a truck as a kid, got a totally wrecked leg, went through the medical system. They couldn't fix me. I was unsatisfied with the results, and so I just kind of lived a life, an unsatisfactory life with a mangled leg. And then a few years ago, I set out on how to make progress on this condition where no path existed. So it's that kind of problem. Could be a medical condition, could be something else, but just something where you need more than hard work. You need more than executing on a pre-existing plan. It's something where you need a novel solution, where you don't know really where you're going or how to fix yourself. So there are, these things I'm going to tell you are things I didn't know myself before I started, and they're things I realize now that I adopted as I went through the process by trial and error. So there are four things I want to talk about. The first one is to address these nebulous problems. Number one is you need to really know your problem. And this may sound obvious, but most of the people I work with that have a condition or a problem really don't know their problem. And let me tell you what I mean. In my example, or using myself as an example, this happened when I was 8 years old, and I grew up for decades dealing with my leg. And so I knew it in that sense. I knew my problem, but I really didn't know it in a sense that was helpful to experts and specialists to help me with the problem. So I could tell you in general what had happened to me. Like I got hit by a truck, I lost the side of my leg, but I couldn't list off every muscle that was affected, every part of bone I lost, every nerve that was damaged, every deformity that appeared. And I couldn't describe it in a language that anybody could really understand. I couldn't speak in medical terms. So when I'd walk in 20 years later to a professional's office, I could hardly talk about my problems in their terms. I could only talk about them in a very superficial, high-level way. So what I did, what I thought of doing was, hey, if I'm going to help myself, I need to know my problem at least as well as the person across from me knows it, so that we can work on a solution together. And so to cure that, or one of the many things I did, was I called up every place I had ever been a patient, got all my medical records, and it ended up being a stack of 500 pages. And I read through every single page. I looked up any term I didn't understand, and then I read through them again, and then I read through them again. And through doing this, I really learned my condition backwards and forwards. So now the source of knowledge in my condition went from those medical files and was added to me. So now when I walked in an office, it wasn't like I just, with a professional, it wasn't like I just now slapped down 500 pages and said, hey, can you please go study that for 2 weeks and come back to me with an answer? Nobody's going to do that. Nobody has the time to do that. I walked in there and I could articulate my condition in their language. And any question they asked me, I was able to respond in technical detail and with experiential example. That was just one of the ways where I really owned the knowledge of my condition and allowed me to progress further when I was trying to find other individuals to help me. Moving on to the second point. The second one is setting a high level of effort. Again, this might sound obvious, but even someone like myself, who I endured my condition for decades, even though I was enduring it and I went through the pain and I did the rehab, etc., so I was exerting effort, I wasn't exerting the highest level of effort. And the difference is the level of effort you set will set the effort of the other people you work with. And again, this gets back to the other people you work with. At the end of the day, if you're working with a truly difficult problem, that involves a lot of expertise and advice from other people and different perspectives, you're inevitably going to be working with a team. If you're working all by yourself, you're not doing it right. You're wasting time. You're probably not going to get things solved. So when you find this team, when you walk in the door, if you demonstrate that you're willing to work harder than everybody else, when you're willing to put in all your effort, sacrifice your nights, your weekends, you'll inspire the other people that you meet to do the same. And this is so critical because if you're doing something, again, that requires a brand new solution, most of the people you're working with don't have time to help you find a brand new solution. You're just one of their many patients or people they're working with, and you fill out a 20-minute slot or a 1-hour slot of their day, and they do the best they can in the time they see you. But they're not going to have time to reinvent the wheel in that segment. They're simply executing on what they know. So if you really want to force that person to raise their game and help you, and frankly sacrifice their nights and their weekends to work on your problem when they have their own problems to deal with, you need to inspire them. You need to set your level of effort in such a way that they'll feel bad if they don't meet it. But, I mean, I don't even like to think about it that way. I like to think that, they see in you someone that's worth spending extra time on, that they're not going to throw away their time, that you're going to give them feedback, that if they propose a solution to you or give you something to try, that you're going to try it and you're going to do it, double what they said, that you're going to complete everything they give you and come back for more. Because they're hungry. If they're any good at their job, they really love to see people break the mold. But you have to identify yourself as someone who's willing to break that mold, and that all starts with effort. Okay, number three. Number three is to share everything all the time. Now, what this means is if you have a problem you're trying to solve, you need to let everybody in your life, both intimately and in a casual sense, that you are trying to solve this problem. This is something I really failed to do throughout my life. I was so ashamed of my condition, the fact that my leg was deformed, the fact that it prevented me from doing certain things. I never wanted to admit that this is a problem for me. Maybe those of you watching this, some of you can relate to this. It's like I didn't want to admit to myself that this was a big problem for me. I didn't want to fail at solving it. So the less I engaged myself in it, the less I thought about it, the less I shared with other people, that I really wanted to be able to run. I wanted to be able to not be ashamed of my leg. I wanted to be able to have a device that I was comfortable in sitting down and standing up. I didn't want to feel like I was complaining. Because of this, I held everything really close. And if I ever got an idea of something to do, I wanted to do it on my own. I didn't want to share it with other people because I didn't want to fail. This is the absolute backwards way of looking at things. And I understand if you feel this way, because I felt this way for so long. But if you are on the previous path of really knowing your condition and you're exerting a high level of effort, I realized that it's not like I figured one day I needed to share. I just realized I started becoming more and more willing to share because I was just eager and excited to share what I'd learned and to talk to other people knowledgeable. I was less afraid of what I was going to find out. I was more excited about what I was going to find out because I knew the subject more and more. And so one quick example of this is I made business cards. I put all my project and what I was working on a website, this website, and I made business cards. And anybody I ever met, I handed out business cards. And I began sharing things on social media. And when I started tinkering with my own designs, I was using a Dremel, like a really simple Dremel tool, and I tagged them in one of my posts. And they actually ended up reaching out to me, and they were an amazing company, or they are an amazing company, and they basically asked me if I needed any tools. And they saw what I was doing. They saw the level of effort I was putting in. They saw my expertise, how I was educating myself on really solving this problem when I wasn't even a professional. And they ended up asking me what I needed, and I gave them a list of the tools that would help, and they sent them all to me. Dremel, if you're watching this, thank you. Still use all your tools. And that is one of so many examples of me just opening up to the world with what I was working on. It was just amazing about how eager people were to help me. Okay. Finally, the last point I want to talk about is living your goals. So this final one is really important. Again, taking it back to myself, throughout the decades of dissatisfaction I had with my own condition, wanting things to be different than they were. For example, wanting to be able to participate in sports or more sports, wanting to be not self-conscious, wanting to be able to walk around with shorts on, wanting to be able to swim without my brace on, where people could see my leg, wanting all those things. They were all just wants. They weren't things they were kind of goals, closet goals, but I wasn't living any of those goals, or I was not living any of those goals. And as a result, they were almost these fake phantom goals. And they were incredibly uninspiring to myself and incredibly uninspiring to other individuals that I potentially could work with. So I'm going to give you a quick example, an abstract example. We'll take me running, for example. It is not very motivating or inspiring for yourself or anybody else if all you do is talk about how you want to run someday. And this has very little to do with the fact that if you're a good runner or a bad runner. It's just whether you're running or not running. Now, it's a very different story if, say that was scenario A, you walk into some professional or somebody you're working with and say, hey, I really want to run someday. And I have, there are all these problems, and this is why I can't do it, and this is why I'm self-conscious about it, and this is why I think all these things are going to go wrong and I don't try it. It's a much better story if you walk in and you talk to an expert. Again, in my case, talk to an orthotist, prosthetist, somebody who makes braces, or physical therapist, and I say, hey, I really want to run a mile. And I've been trying for the last month, and every time I run a quarter mile, I get a blister on my foot. Now, the key difference between those two stories is, one is purely aspirational. You haven't attempted to solve anything that you're doing, and you're coming in with these abstract, large, nebulous problems. The other one is something very specific and direct. So if you tell somebody, hey, I'm running a quarter mile and then I'm having a problem, number one, you're demonstrating that you're not just talking about what you want to do, but you're actually trying it. And number two, you're giving them a very finite problem to solve. So in that first case scenario, the real problem is, why aren't you off your ass and actually trying this and running? Where the second scenario is very specific of, I have a blister on my heel and it's causing a problem because my brace is rubbing against it. Now that is a problem that an orthotist can solve, or a prosthetist can solve in my case. Or if you got incredibly tired and let's say my quad started burning and I just ran out of steam. That's a problem that a physical therapist can solve. That's something they're going to hear and go, hey, I've never dealt with a case like this before. I've never dealt with an injury like this before. But I have dealt with people trying to run and then gassing out really fast. Or I have dealt with blisters on feet before, and I can solve that. So you take it from this really complicated, hard, nebulous problem, and you get it into this very specific problem. And then once you knock down that little problem, you go out and run again. And then maybe you go from a fourth of a mile to half a mile. And then maybe a new problem pops up. And then you take that very specific problem and you, again, like the last point, share it with everybody you know. And maybe it's not an orthotist problem. Maybe it's not a PT problem. But maybe it's a shoe problem. And the guy at the shoe store is able to give you some equipment, or a coach that does running is able to weigh in on it. By finding these really finite problems, you can much more easily communicate your condition to other people. And that really goes back to that first thing, which is knowing your condition, knowing where your goals and your problem intersects with the life you want to live. Okay, it's probably long enough. I think I'm going to make another video where I go a little more in depth on each of these points just to illustrate. I have so many examples in my life about how these four things, these approaches panned out in all kinds of situations that I could have not have scripted. So I'll leave it there. Hopefully this inspires you, regardless of what your problem is, to look at it in a new light. And I promise you, if you go down this checklist of knowing your problem, setting a high level of effort, spending your nights, spending your weekends working on this problem, sharing everything that you're doing with everybody around you, with everybody you ever meet, with everybody on the internet, and then finally, not just talking about goals you want, but actually living them and coming into contact with very acute problems that are solvable chunks. I promise you, if you do these four things, it will revolutionize the way you approach this, what is a seemingly intractable lifelong problem. Let me know if you have any feedback. Good luck, and get to work.